The first time anyone noticed something was off about the new nurse, it wasn't because she made a mistake. It was because she didn't react when a metal tray crashed to the floor behind her, didn't flinch when a patient screamed, didn't even blink when a senior surgeon barked her name like a threat. She just kept moving, calm and steady, like someone who had learned long ago that panic was a luxury you couldn't afford. Before we begin, if you find yourself drawn to stories about quiet strength, hidden pasts, and the danger of underestimating people based on appearances, go ahead and like this story and subscribe for more, because what unfolds here is exactly that kind of reckoning. Emily Carter arrived at St. Anne's Medical Center on a gray Monday morning carrying nothing but a canvas bag and a file so thin it barely justified the HR stamp on the front. And from the moment she stepped onto the trauma floor, she was written off as another nervous new hire who wouldn't last the year. She was American, mid-30s, average height, brown hair pulled back too tightly, eyes that seemed older than the rest of her face, and a posture that suggested she was trying to take up as little space as possible in a building built on authority and ego. I watched as the charge nurse gave her the once-over, the kind that decided your worth in seconds, and assigned her the least desirable rotation without asking a single question, while a pair of residents nearby exchanged looks that said they'd already placed bets on how long she'd survive the pressure. Emily didn't protest. She nodded, thanked them softly, and went to work, and that alone sealed her reputation as weak. In a hospital where confidence was currency, silence was treated like incompetence, and within hours the jokes started, about her slow movements, her habit of double-checking vitals, the way she paused before following an order as if thinking it through instead of obeying on instinct. One attending surgeon, famous for his temper and spotless record, openly scoffed when she asked for clarification on a medication dosage, muttering loud enough for everyone to hear that nursing schools were clearly lowering their standards, and when a resident snapped at her during a chaotic intake, she apologized even though the error wasn't hers. From my vantage point, moving between stations and hallways, I noticed details others didn't care to see. The faint scars on her forearms that didn't match any civilian accident, the way her eyes tracked every exit in a room, the controlled breathing she used when alarms went off, the fact that her hands only trembled when she was idle, never when she was actually doing something that mattered. She took the overnight shifts no one wanted, cleaned messes that weren't her responsibility, absorbed insults like they were part of the job, and never once defended herself, which only encouraged more laughter, more dismissiveness, more whispered commentary about how she was clearly out of her depth. By the end of her first week, she had earned a nickname she never heard directly, but everyone used anyway, the Rookie, spoken with the kind of tone reserved for liabilities, not colleagues. And yet, beneath that surface, something didn't add up. When a multi-car accident flooded the ER one night, Emily moved differently. Not faster, not louder, but sharper, anticipating needs before orders were given, positioning equipment exactly where it would be needed minutes later, stepping in to steady a panicking intern with a hand on the shoulder that carried more authority than any raised voice. I saw one doctor snap at her for overstepping, only to unknowingly follow her setup moments later and benefit from it, never once realizing who had quietly saved him from fumbling under pressure. Still, when the night ended and the adrenaline faded, she went right back to being invisible, shrinking into the background as if she hadn't just been essential. The prevailing narrative stuck. Emily Carter was too cautious, too soft, too quiet to belong in trauma medicine, and the laughter followed her down every corridor. What no one at St. Anne's knew, what no one even thought to ask, was where she had learned to work like that, why she carried herself like someone who had already seen the worst outcomes imaginable, or why the chaos of a hospital barely registered on her internal radar. They didn't know that she had chosen this anonymity on purpose, that she was running not from failure, but from recognition, and that the calm they mistook for fear was actually restraint. I remember thinking, watching her restock supplies at the end of another brutal shift while a group of doctors joked nearby at her expense, that there are two kinds of quiet in this world: the quiet of someone who is overwhelmed, and the quiet of someone who has survived far more than the room could ever throw at them. At the time, I didn't know which one Emily Carter was. I just knew that when the hospital finally faced something it couldn't handle, the line between those two kinds of quiet was about to be drawn in the most public, undeniable way possible. By the second week, the laughter had settled into something more dangerous than jokes. It became certainty, the kind that makes people stop paying attention. And certainty is how hospitals miss the moment right before everything goes wrong. The shift started like any other, fluorescent lights humming, coffee going cold at the nurse's station, egos already bruised before the first trauma alert sounded, and Emily Carter took her place at the edge of the room as usual, quiet, observant, written off. When the call came in about a military helicopter diverting to St. Anne's due to an unstable patient, it barely registered at first. The ER saw medevacs often enough, and the phrase, training accident, lulled everyone into a false sense of routine. But when the doors burst open and the gurney rolled in, streaked with red and surrounded by men who moved with a discipline that didn't belong in civilian space, the temperature in the room changed. The patient was a SEAL commander, rank evident even without insignia, his body rigid with pain, vitals erratic, blood loss significant, but strangely inconsistent with the visible wounds, and immediately the hierarchy snapped into place. Surgeons took command, residents barked orders, nurses scrambled, and Emily was waved to the periphery with an impatient hand, told to monitor and stay out of the way. She did exactly that, stood where she was told, eyes scanning, mind working, while the doctors debated imaging, protocols, and whether the commander could wait for a specialist who was still 20 minutes out. The room buzzed with overlapping voices, each louder than the last, and in the middle of it all the patient's condition began to slip, subtly at first, then faster, his blood pressure dropping in a way that didn't match the plan forming at the foot of the bed. I saw Emily lean forward slightly, her gaze fixed not on the monitors, but on the man himself. The way his breathing changed, the tension in his neck, the discoloration spreading under his skin, and when she spoke, it wasn't dramatic, just a calm observation offered into the noise. She was ignored. A resident snapped that she should focus on charting. A surgeon waved her off without looking. And Emily did something unexpected. She went quiet again, but this time it wasn't retreat, it was calculation. As minutes passed, the commander's vitals dipped into dangerous territory, confusion spreading among the staff as standard interventions failed to stabilize him, and the room filled with that particular kind of tension that comes when authority starts to crack. Emily stepped closer, not pushing, not arguing, just positioning herself where she could act if needed, and when she spoke again, her voice cut through the chaos, not louder, but steadier, carrying the weight of certainty instead of rank. She named the problem no one else had considered, explained it in plain terms, suggested an immediate intervention that went against the plan forming in the surgeons' heads, and for a split second the room froze, the way it does when someone breaks an unspoken rule. A nurse wasn't supposed to do that, especially not this nurse. There was pushback, sharp and dismissive, but time was bleeding out of the room along with the patient, and finally, more out of desperation than trust, one of the doctors nodded. "Do it," he said, already bracing himself for blame if it went wrong. Emily moved instantly, hands steady, posture changing so subtly it took me a moment to realize I was watching a different person than the one who had been mocked all week. She guided others instead of waiting for instruction, corrected a setup before it became a mistake, and carried out the procedure with a confidence that didn't seek approval. The effect was almost immediate. The monitor stabilized. The commander's breathing eased. Color returned where it had been draining away, and the room went quiet. Not awkward quiet, but stunned. No one said anything for several seconds, as if acknowledging what had just happened would force them to confront how wrong they'd been. Emily stepped back as soon as the crisis passed, shoulders lowering, voice softening again as she returned to her assigned role, but the shift had already occurred. I saw it in the way the doctors looked at her now, confusion replacing condescension, curiosity creeping in where dismissal had been. No one laughed anymore. No one joked. They worked, efficiently and silently, and when the commander was finally wheeled out toward recovery, stable and alive, the room exhaled as one. Emily began cleaning up, as if nothing unusual had happened, but I noticed one of the surgeons watching her with a frown that wasn't anger. It was realization. The kind that comes too late to save pride, but just in time to save a life. No one said it out loud yet, but everyone felt it. The rookie nurse wasn't who they thought she was, and whatever she'd just done, She'd learned it somewhere far removed from textbooks and hospital politics. The reckoning was coming. They just didn't know how public it was about to be. The reckoning arrived not with shouting or speeches, but with silence, the kind that settles over a room when everyone realizes they have just witnessed something they can't explain away. The SEAL commander regained consciousness late that evening, long after the tension had drained from the trauma bay and the hospital returned to its usual rhythm. And when word spread that he was asking for the nurse who had stabilized him, the doctors assumed it was a formality, maybe even a misunderstanding. Emily Carter was called in quietly, almost reluctantly, still in the same plain scruggs, still carrying herself like someone who expected to be corrected or dismissed at any moment. The room was crowded when she entered, surgeons, residents, administrators lingering under the pretense of charting, but all of them faded into the background when the commander pushed himself upright despite the protests, swung his legs over the side of the bed, and slowly stood. What happened next rewrote the story they had been telling themselves from the beginning. He raised his hand, straight back despite the pain, and rendered a full, deliberate salute to the woman they had laughed at, his voice rough but unwavering as he thanked her not as a patient to a nurse, but as one professional to another who had earned his respect. No one spoke. No one moved. The weight of that moment did what policies and hierarchies never could. It stripped away assumptions and left only truth. Emily accepted the salute with a small nod, not returning it, not explaining herself, simply acknowledging it, and then she stepped back, already receding into the space she had occupied before the world caught up. In the days that followed, the tone of the hospital shifted. Questions replaced commands, listening replaced dismissal, and the word rookie disappeared as if it had never existed. Emily didn't stay long after that. Some people aren't meant to be hidden once they've been seen, but the lesson she left behind lingered in every corridor and trauma bay. That competence doesn't announce itself, that experience doesn't always wear the uniform you expect, and that the most dangerous mistake professionals can make is assuming they know who someone is before they've seen what they can do.